After 2024, The Diary of Jade by Candace Clorinda. For my Nona Shirley, I miss you every day. Prologue. Tap, tap, tap. Cry, screech, moan, wail. Tap, tap, tap. Bang, clash, yell, smash. Tap, tap, tap. I cover my ears and rock back and forth. I hum a note-less tune. Still, I can hear that tap, tap, tap. And the sullen cry of the other souls around me. I am forever to be trapped in the walls around me. Is that not punishment enough? Why must I hear that tap, tap, tap? It tortures me so. Entry 1. I feel as if I'm going mad already. It matters not if you are crazy entering those cursed doors, for soon you shall be crazy anyway. I do not know how I am to survive this. I feel as if the walls are closing in on me and I cannot breathe. I never thought that a place could be so cold, so dark, and so scary. I feel the shadows all around me. I have never been so frightened in my life. The walls of my room are pink, a failed attempt to make this place seem bright and inviting. However, the color is off. The paint is both peeling and yellowing. At one point, this might have been a cheerful room. Now the room only stands as a reminder that this is not a home. I wonder about the poor soul who inhabited this room before I was brought here. What happened to that person? Did they ever get out of here? I would like to think that they did, and that they now live in a beautiful house with a big garden. Still, I know that it is more logical that they are still here somewhere. That is, if they're not dead. I am sure that next to nobody has the chance to get out of here alive. The sky is beautiful outside. It seems to mock me as I look out at it from barred windows. Yet sometimes there are moments that the sky seems sad. There are moments that she seems to cry just because I cannot bask in her beauty. She seems to be weeping for me, as if I were her child, lost to her forever, longing for me to dance on the grass that she keeps so green with her tears. So conflicting she is, I fear she shall never decide if she wants to mock me or shower me with love. We never thought that this could happen. We never thought the alt-right Republicans would actually win and actually enact their Project 2025 plan. But after the Don't Say Gay bills, anti-trans legislation, and the overturn of Roe v. Wade, we should have realized that the far-right Republican Party meant business. It started out small, the same way it did in Nazi Germany. At first, all of the queer people were made to have the pride flag on every item of clothing that they owned, the same way that the Jewish people had to sew the Star of David onto all of their clothing to identify them. Still, we didn't see it coming. We all were wearing our respective pride flag pins on our backpacks and jean jackets anyway. What was it to be made to have the pride flag on all of our clothes? We were not ashamed to be queer, so why not wear our flags with pride on everything every day? Queer people started to buy more and more clothing with the pride flag already printed on it. Everything from work uniforms to everyday attire had a visible pride flag on it to visually identify the person at the quickest glance. Then we started getting banned from going into stores, colleges, churches, even museums and theme parks. Less and less places were available for us to exist in until we were allowed to be almost nowhere. People started getting fired from their jobs and losing their homes. Next, they started going after the witches and the pagans. Now that they had suppressed the group that they were convinced was an abomination, it was time to fully eradicate the group of people they feared the most. The people who they knew did not believe in their one almighty God. Some people started running, but the majority were rounded up like cattle. Some were burned alive. Others were told that if they repented and turned to the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, that they would be spared and allowed to continue to be a part of this new society. At least as long as they went to church multiple times a week to pray for their sins. By this time, there were 2 huge walls lining both the border to Canada and the border to Mexico. There was no way in or out for anyone being persecuted. So they decided to enslave any and all people of color, forcing them to work in the same capacity as the African slaves and the Irish indentured servants had in the early days of the United States of America. No person of color was safe, not even the ones who had loudly endorsed strict conservative values long before Project 2025 took root. After all of this, they started opening up facilities like this one. They call them conversion asylum. Conversion, as if being oneself should be completely disavowed and we should all be sheep in their flock. Asylum, as if there needs to be some safe place for you to disavow yourself and come to the light of their land. Their Christian utopia that is only a utopia for them and not anyone they deem different or sinful. Like the mental asylums of the past, these facilities have become a dumping ground for the unwanted of this new society that has taken root. Therefore, not only are there the people they intend occupying this facility, but also mentally and physically handicapped individuals. There are even a few stray witches and pagans that have lived long enough to make it to one of these facilities instead of being publicly burned or forced into a public church to repent. I was an author once, before all this happened. I was an author and I wrote high fantasy queer books, the kind of books that were promptly banned when Project 2025 took root. Not only were queer books banned, but any and all classic and modern literature that might be perceived as a threat. I have spent almost 2 years running and hiding from places like this. 2 years of constantly moving from one place to the next until I slipped up and was brought here. As a bisexual and a pagan, I am considered extremely dangerous. The only thing that would have made me any more dangerous is if I had happened to be born a person of color. However, my near-transparent snow white skin kept me from being a triple threat. I'm aware of how stupid this sounds, and yet this is the hill that they are willing to stand on. Unfortunately, it is a hill that they have not had to die on. I'm sure they would happily die on it. They think we are abominations, unnatural and impure demons sent to turn their children from Christ, as if we had that kind of power, as if their intolerance was not doing that for them. All we wanted to do was exist as ourselves, but that wasn't going to happen on the alt-right's watch. So we went on the run. We were burned alive, enslaved, or we were rounded up and taken to places like this. Places where we could be hidden away from their new society as they attempt to convert us from who we are into who they want us to be. I should be grateful I was sent here. I could have ended up burned alive like so many less fortunate pagans. I do not know what will become of me in this dreadful place. However, I do not think it shall be in any good way. Jade. Entry 2. I grow tired, but sleep will not come. Not here. My only friend I made yesterday, his name is Richard. He's a guard here. Richard is the one who was kind enough to bring me this pen and paper. He's the only person in this place that I can depend on. We talked today and I asked him why he gave me this pen and paper. He told me that he recognized me from the back of one of the books he had read. He then looked both ways, unbuttoned his shirt, and lifted up his undershirt to reveal his top surgery scars. It was at that point that I knew I had found in him a true ally. We talked for a long time. Richard is a very interesting person. He really opened up to me. He told me the story about how he chose his new name. It was an inside joke between him and his friends. They always joked that he had the biggest dick of any of them despite being born without a penis. So instead of going with a masculine form of his dead name or naming himself after a male he admired, he decided to call himself Richard, as the most common shortened form of the name is Dick. I thought that was increasingly clever and very funny, despite being rather crass in nature overall. The time passes slowly here, and my mind replays all of the horrors and atrocities I've witnessed over the last few years. From time to time, my mind wanders back to memories from before this evil spread across the land. These memories no longer feel as if they are my own. They feel as if they're from a completely different life. In a lot of ways, they are. I had friends before all this. For the first time in years, I thought about them. I've thought about Lana, the kindest, most amazing human I'd ever met. I've thought about Hannah, who was always there with a radiant smile and a reassuring word. I've thought about Matt, who could throw tarot like nobody I ever met before. I thought about Ashley, who spent years fighting to get community gardens planted. I thought about Chelsea, who was the first person I came out to. I've thought about all of the people who were there for me in all my years of life. Some I know for sure have been taken from this plane of existence. Others, I have no way of knowing if they have lived or died. For the first time in nearly 2 years, I cried. I allowed myself to mourn my friends. I allowed myself to think about the amazing people that they were. I allowed the shadows that have been on the edge of my vision for all these years to encase me in their darkness. Then I thought about how, for the first time in years, I made a friend. I'm just so happy that there's at least one person here who sees me as a person and not an abomination. Jade. Entry 3. Today an old man was killed. We were gathered together in the dining hall. The dining hall is under heavy watch, but even under heavy watch, the old man was slain. Some people should be under heavy watch, like the wicked man who killed that poor man for his small share of food. The old man was targeted because he was the weakest among us. He was targeted because the man thought hurting the old man would be easy. He wasn't wrong. The man pushed the old man on the floor and stabbed him 4 times in the face with a fork before plunging that fork through his frail heart. It took several seconds before the guards saw what was happening, and by that time, it was far too late for the old man. The man was taken away, covered in the blood of the old man. We shall probably never see him again. Perhaps they'll keep him in his room and bring food to him so that he can no longer hurt another soul. Perhaps they will beat him until he can taste death. It is not for me to know if he shall be fully consumed by its dark embrace. It is not for me to say what was or was not done to him when the man was carried off. It was at that moment that others who had stood back and watched it happen descended on the tray to fight for the old man's share of food. The body of the old man was carried out by 2 guards as people grabbed at his shoes and clothing, trying as hard as they could to take anything that could be held onto for themselves. From what I have come to gather, a shallow grave was dug in the yard in the back of the building, with no headstone or marker of any kind to prove that he was ever alive. So much blood, so much violence. A life lost over a small portion of bread and meat. I haven't the smallest idea what his name was. However, my dreams shall be haunted by the sight of the old man taking his last breath. That is, if sleep finds me this night. Jade. Entry 4. I slept today, but only because Richard made me. He sat in my room and kept an eye on me to make sure that I slept. When I awoke, he was still there and he asked me how I felt. Although I said I was better, he made me sleep more. When I woke for the second time, he was still there. It made me wonder if he had ever left. This second slumber must have eased his mind, for he did not force me to get any more sleep. Instead, he stayed for a long time to talk with me. I fear I would have lost myself completely if it were not for him. I worry every day for him that he might be discovered. He is playing a dangerous game and he knows it. I asked him how he evaded detection for so long, and he told me that when everything started to go down, he did everything he could to scrub his social media of anything and everything trans related. He started following alt-right media and paid attention to everything that was going on. I spent nearly 2 years running and trying to avoid detection, never staying in one place for more than a week. He moved to a completely different state where nobody knew who he was and started living as a cis man. He started making friends with the people who would hate him if they ever figured out who he really was. He did this so he could network and find out more of what was going on with this new society that was developing. It wasn't long before he found other people who were doing as he was, and they formed an underground network. The group found and bought an old underground bunker and refitted it to be a self-sustaining, safe place for queer people. First, one of the cis gay men in his group got a job as human resources here. Once they had a man on the inside, that handled the hiring process, and Richard got a job as a guard here. It was clever, sending a man in to be human resources first. Having a man like that on the inside who could doctor physical forms and other sensitive information was an extremely smart move if you want to get a trans man on the inside. The group figured that they could use these positions to try and help as many queer people as they could. Even with 2 men on the inside, so far it has been risky. Richard told me that so far he's been able to smuggle out 6 queer people and get them to the underground safe house, the last of which was nearly 2 weeks ago. He knows that if he's caught, he risks not only himself, but his friend and human resources being discovered. In order to avoid detection, he cannot risk smuggling more than 1 person out every few months. While he was explaining all of this to me, I saw a sadness in his eyes that seemed to say that he wishes it were significantly more. He is a good man. Jade. Entry 5. The body count rises with every day that passes. I do not know how many people have been buried in the small yard behind the building, but I can hear people digging the graves well into the night. I think if the count rises much higher, they shall have to find some other way to dispose of the corpses. It seems to me that if many more people die, they shall have to take a page out of the Nazis' book and just start burning the bodies. I do not know how such a large amount of people have been lost in such a short amount of time, but there have been rumors of experiments gone wrong. I do not know what to think about that. Part of me hopes that it's an illness that's passing through the building. Perhaps it could be some sort of newfangled plague? Could we be lucky enough for it to be a new, stronger COVID-19 variant? I find that unlikely. Although, if the pandemic is any indication, it is not likely that they would hand out masks or vaccines to stop the spread of illness. Their aversion is far too strong. So if, in fact, that does happen to be what is killing off so many people, we will have little to no defense against it. So far, it seems like the old and disabled seem to be the highest demographic that I'm seeing fall victim to whatever is killing off so many people. The near constant digging that I can hear, loud and clear from my room, continues to strike fear into my heart. Just because it is the old and disabled today doesn't mean that it will not be me tomorrow. I asked Richard if he knew anything. He says he does not. Honestly, I think that he is frightened to find out the truth. I cannot blame him, for I too am frightened to find out what happened to those poor souls. I try in vain to think that I shall not be among them. Jade. Entry 6. Today is the first Sunday since I've been here. I was brought into the adjoining building that serves as a chapel today. It was set up with candles, crosses, and pictures of white Jesus. I remembered some fact that I'd picked up about the white Jesus painting actually being a painting of the artist's gay lover, and I had to stifle a laugh. Everyone else was already seated in the pews, with the guards lining the walls and exits of the building. I was brought up to the priest standing at the altar. The priest told me to turn away from my gods and accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. When I said nothing, the priest brought me over to a basin of water and screamed for me to repent. I continued to say nothing. Next thing I know, the priest is plunging my head in the basin, forcing me to be baptized. The priest held my head under the water until I felt like I was about to die. My lungs burned as I tried to hold my breath. Despite my best efforts, my body betrayed me. I inhaled the holy water, and only then did he finally lift my head from the basin. He went on and on about how my soul was now saved and declared me a Christian in front of everyone. I felt violated. I would never turn my back on my gods. Still, this man seemed confident enough to call me a Christian, to tell me how proud he was to have me in his congregation. He handed me a towel and seated me in front of the pew. He cheerfully started his sermon. I do not know what he said. The only thing I could focus on was my wet hair, burning lungs, and the fact that his voice sounded like the personification of the cat who ate the canary. He was so pleased with himself and his lot in life, so pleased at violating and humiliating a queer pagan woman in front of every person on the property. I do not know what is going to happen to me. Richard says that he's going to try and find a way to get me out of here sooner rather than later. I do not see how he can accomplish such a thing when it seems the only way for me to get out of here involves a pine box. Despite the fact that it has only been 2 weeks since he smuggled the last person out, he seems determined to get me free from this place. I keep telling him that it's too risky, however, my words seem to fall on deaf ears. I will not let him get caught for me. I ran for 2 years, never making friends, quickly moving from place to place and only thinking about how I would survive. I became a transient, completely detached from the world and everyone in it. I was too filled with fear to risk making a single friend along the way. Not one single friend in nearly 2 years. Richard was smart. He found a better way to survive. Richard has risked everything 6 times for people who were probably far more deserving than me. I have barely been here for a week. There are people here who have been here far longer. There are people here who have a much greater need. I survived 2 years on my own. If it is my time, it is my time. Richard is truly a great man, and if I am to die, I am grateful for the chance to have known him. Jade. Entry 7. A woman was almost killed today. This time, it was when we were taken to the Pin. The Pin is an enclosed area along the site of the building that we are taken to exercise for about an hour a day. This monster, who doesn't deserve the title of man, tried to assault the woman who did everything she could to fight back. He grabbed her by the neck and started to punch her in the face. By the time 2 of the guards were able to get him off of her, she was red-faced and rather bloody. She was missing most of her nails as she had scratched at whatever flesh she could reach for. She kicked her feet at whatever they could collide with. I marveled at her bravery. The monster was dragged back inside, and once he was clear, the woman was brought to the medical wing. I hope that she shall be all right. I hope she shall never see that monster again. I hope he dies a painful death. Perhaps I've finally gone insane. Perhaps I have finally become the danger to society that the alt-right made us all out to be. Before all of this, it would have never occurred to me to wish any person dead. Before we were rounded up and shut away from the rest of the world, it would have never occurred to me to want anyone to join the others in the small yard behind the building. I suppose if we were not the monsters that they painted us to be before, they've done a good job of turning us into those monsters now. They wanted inhuman creatures that they could point their fingers at to show the world that they were right. It would seem that they now have their inhuman creatures. They have won. They have turned us into what they always thought we were. In the future, if there is such a thing, they shall tell their children that we were always like this, that we were always the boogeyman under their beds. They will never admit that they drove us to being that boogeyman. They will never admit that they turned us into animals that we now seem to be. We are the ocean during a mighty storm, violent and unpredictable. Jade. Entry 8. I saw the woman today. She's still shaken up, and her neck has the most horrible bruises I have ever seen. At least she's alive. At least that monster was pulled off of her before he could do more damage to her. She's a very beautiful woman. I wonder if that's why that monster targeted her. I fear that he would have done much worse if it had not been for the 2 guards. I happened to notice something odd about her today. Aside from the bruising around her neck, there were weird red marks on her temples. I noticed the marks on several other people as well. They look like something out of a horror movie. It seems to me that these red marks are a sign ushering in a nightmare. The kind of nightmare that you cannot fully remember when you wake, however, you know it was completely terrifying. I do not know what the red marks are. I am not sure that I want to find out. I'm not sure I want to know what is really going on in this place where insanity has taken root. Everything here is so wrong, so painful. I hate to think that I shall be here for the rest of my days. At least I have one friend. At least I have Richard. That is more than most. I can take solace in that knowledge. Jade. Entry 9. Our numbers dwindle. Today I saw that 7 of our group were not among us in the dining hall. The monster that hurt the woman has been gone for days. I cannot say that I am sorry about that. Still, today I noticed 2 old men, an old woman, and 4 younger men were not among us, when I know for a fact that I saw all 7 of them just yesterday. Every single one of those 7 were afflicted with those red marks on their temples. Part of me wishes I knew what was going on. The other part of me is far too frightened to want to know. This place is a tomb full of the living condemned to death. Richard continues to try to convince me to let him help me get out of here before I am snuffed out. I have so much fear in this place where the dead walk. This place of lost souls damned to this building that is the very gates of Helheim. It is almost as if I can see the bridge that separates our realm of existence from hers. We slip further and further away from Midgard. No Asgard or Folkvanger for us, no Valkyrie to pull us from this hostile field of battle, only Helheim awaits. I never knew that such a place could exist, yet here it stands. I am so frightened that my new home shall be among the poor souls inhabiting the graves in the yard behind the building, but I cannot let Richard risk smuggling me out so soon after he already did so for another. I cannot risk both Richard and I being buried together in that yard. I need there to be a world where Richard lives, even if I do not. The thought of Richard no longer taking breaths fills me with more dread than the thought of my own death. Richard must endure. Richard must survive. For 2 years, I cared for no one except myself. I worried about no survival but my own. I cannot have Richard's death on my hands. I will not allow it to be so. Jade. Entry 10. I grow weak with fear. 12 more of our numbers are no longer among us. We are only 20 now. 5 of our 20 have those red marks, including the woman who was attacked in the pin. I could be next. These could very well be the last words that I ever write. I can almost feel the cold embrace of death. It is lurking in every corner, waiting for me. I can smell the damp earth that shall envelop me. There must be a way out of here without ending up in the cold ground. There must be a way that does not put Richard's whole operation in danger. This fear is almost all-consuming. However, I cannot allow Richard to smuggle me out right now. It is too soon. I will not allow him to do this for me. Richard says that with so many people vanishing from our ranks, now is the perfect time to act. I still think that it is far too risky, especially after the forced baptism. I am sure that several eyes shall be on me for quite some time to come. The baptism might have been sufficient for the priest. Still, I fear it might not have been sufficient for all. The woman who was attacked in the pin has survived the red marks so far. Perhaps I shall be just as lucky as she has been. Perhaps I shall survive this place long enough for it to be safe for Richard to smuggle me out. Perhaps Richard should smuggle out the woman who was attacked first. She's been here longer than I have. Does she not deserve to be out of here first? I am scared. I do not know what I should do. I want to run. I want to be out of this place. I want to feel the sunlight on my face. I want to feel the rain on my skin. I want to be free. I want all of us to be free. Above all, I want Richard to be safe. Fear and death are my bedfellows. Jade. Entry 11. 3 more people were added to our numbers today. However, 5 more were gone. 2 that did not have red marks yesterday have red marks today. They do not seem to care if they scare us, for we shall be dead soon anyway. They know that they have us where they want us. Even Richard grows pale with fright. If I make it another day, I dare say I shall not know how I did it. Richard continues to plead with me to allow him to smuggle me out. I continue to protest. I know I'm being stubborn. I know that I am being unreasonable. I know I am allowing fear to cripple me, to bend me to her will in ways that I should not allow. I know that I am putting Richard under untold amounts of mental duress, yet I continue to do so in the hope that I will not have his blood on my hands. We are born, we love, we grow old, we die, and for a time, we are remembered. After time has passed, we are forgotten. This is how the world is supposed to work, but that is not how it works in here. In here, I am only an abomination. One queer, unwanted member of society among so many. I fear only Richard shall remember me. I shall die and be quickly forgotten. Jade. Entry 12. 7 more were gone today from our numbers. I noticed 3 more people with red marks on their temples, and today I got close enough to the woman who was attacked in the pin to realize that the red marks are burns. I do not know how I did not realize before that these are the kind of marks that one would get from electroshock therapy. I suppose my brain was attempting to protect me from coming to such a horrible conclusion. I suppose my subconscious mind was trying to protect my conscious mind. So many people over the course of so many days with so many burns. How I am not one of their numbers, I shall never know. I am fearful. Richard has offered to stay in my room at night so that I cannot be taken. I'm grateful, but I know that if they want me gone, they shall take me anyway. I might be a person to Richard, but in their eyes, I am little more than an animal. Once I was an author. I would write my little stories and would share them with the world. I would write epic stories with dragons and romance and queer couples who fell in love. I wrote stories about my gods. I would write stories about far-off magical lands that might have gone through a tragedy or two. However, every story that I wrote had a happy ending. I fear my story will not end so happily. Jade. Entry 13. There are only 5 of us left. This place reeks of death. I can smell it everywhere in this cold, evil place. I can smell it coming through the bars on my window. Still, for the first time, I feel hope. Instead of a person being forcefully baptized as a prologue to the sermon, one of the guards got married. I learned his name is Victor. He took a chance and asked the head of this wretched place if he could wed one of the women held captive here. It was the woman who was attacked by that monster some time ago. I learned her name is Rebecca. The guard was one of the men who pulled that monster off of her. He would visit her daily to see how she was doing. At some point through this exchange, the two fell in love. It is unconventional, declaring your love for someone so soon after meeting them for the first time. Their meeting in the first place was not exactly conventional either. This place is not exactly conventional. These are unconventional times we live in. It would appear that unconventional is the new normal. The head agreed that he could marry her and take her home with one stipulation. Victor needed to be married to her before she left the building. The head of this operation, Mr. Samuel Goodfellow, felt that this was a great success. He gathered us all in the chapel early to stand in front of us and announce that this is what they had hoped for when they started setting up these facilities. Full rehabilitation. This was the kind of great success that they had been praying for. The priest married the couple and then sat the couple down in the same pew that I was ushered into the week before. When the sermon had ended, the couple was allowed to exit first. The smile on Rebecca's face as she left made her even more beautiful. Her hastily put together plain white dress was stunning compared to the scrubs that the rest of us are given to wear. The scrubs that Rebecca had been wearing just yesterday. No matter if Rebecca is a bisexual or a witch or a pagan, it does not matter. For now, she is free. Rebecca got to leave. That means there's a way to get out of this place that doesn't involve risking Richard. For if there's one way out, then there must be other ways out. I just hope that I can come up with a plan that does not involve the risk of Richard being discovered before it is too late. Jade. Entry 14. A boy and a girl have joined our ranks as one more of our numbers is gone. The boy and girl look very close in age and are very young. I believe they are twins, or at least siblings, for they have very similar features. They both have the most beautiful red hair and green eyes. I think I overheard them call each other Jennifer and Jonathan, but I cannot be sure. In this place where everyone is treated like an animal, it is very difficult to learn names. They must be orphans, for I would not think that 2 children that are so young would be thrown in here for being witches, pagan, or queer. Neither of them seems to be handicapped mentally or physically from what I can come to gather, so orphans they must be. We also acquired 2 new doctors. I would not imagine that new doctors would bother announcing themselves to the masses. However, it would seem that Jackson and Edwin Storm wanted to make a good first impression. They say they are brothers, but unlike the boy and the girl, they look nothing alike. Jackson has gold-colored hair and green eyes, where Edwin has black hair and blue eyes. I found out from Richard later in the day that these 2 new doctors are a part of the underground operation. It did not take me long after this declaration to realize that the men are in fact not brothers at all. They are so kind that I am quite sure that they shall be a much-needed light in this vile place. I hope with all of my heart that they do not get discovered. Jade. Entry 15. Once again, fear cripples me. 4 more were added to our numbers this day. However, everyone except the assumed twins and myself are gone. I can hear so many holes being dug. Every day, I hear the dull thud, thud, thud of shovels ripping apart the earth. I know that one of those graves could be mine. I can think of no way out alive save marriage. I suppose I could try and catch the eye of one of the guards. However, now that the women in this place know that marriage is a way out, just about every woman is throwing herself at the guards. That is a lot of competition. However, I do not think it is the thought of competition that stops me from pursuing one of the guards. I believe it is the thought of marrying a stranger that does not feel right, even if it is to save my life. I always wanted to marry for love. I will not give up that dream, not even if it means my death. It is only a matter of time before I no longer exist. Jade. Entry 16. Richard made a confession to me today. He told me that he's in love with me. He says he wants to marry me and take me away from this place. I told him how much I care about him. I let him know just how much I would love that. However, I asked him what would happen if we get married, and after a time he realized that the only reason he wanted to marry me was because he did not want me to die. He told me that would not happen. He told me that he loves me and he wants to spend the rest of his life with me. He said that he fell in love with my writing long before he knew me. He said that knowing me has made him love my writing even more. What if this declaration has nothing to do with him being in love with me? I care deeply for Richard, and I would want to marry him. However, I fear that if we marry, I will only hold him back from true happiness. For how can he be truly happy when the reason for such a hastened union is death lurking in the shadows? Jade. Entry 17. Richard brought me roses today. He asked me again to marry him. He rushes to my room every morning, frightened that I shall no longer occupy it. I am just as scared that I shall be gone one morning, but I do not want that fear to be the determining factor of our marriage. I do not want him to wake up one morning and realize that fear, and fear alone, is what drove him to marry me. I care for him too much to let him make a decision based on fear. He keeps telling me how much he loves me and he wants to live his life with me. I believe him. I believe that he believes what he is saying is true. Still, fear has a way of making one believe in things that are not fully true. How can I allow him to make such a huge decision with fear and death lurking around every corner? Jade. Entry 18. Richard came in this morning with a ring adorned with a beautiful jade stone. He said that if I needed proof that fear is not the reason he would like to marry me, that I need to look no further. He told me that the only thing that matters is the two of us together, nothing else. Looking at that ring that does not contain a massive diamond, but instead the stone that I am named for, was enough to convince me that fear is not the reason. After days that felt like weeks of him pleading with me to marry him, I finally said yes. We shall be wed tomorrow, and I shall be free of this place and with Richard. I now know where I belong. I guess everything really does happen for a reason. Jade. Entry 19. Richard and I got married today. I never thought that I would marry someone after only knowing someone for less than 3 weeks. However, here we are. I also never thought that I would get married in a church by a Christian priest. However, that is what happened. I stood there in my own hastily put together plain white dress and walked down the aisle. It was simple. It was beautiful. It was almost perfect. The only thing that could have made it better was to not have a Christian presiding over the ceremony, as well as not having to stay for the sermon after the ceremony. However, a beggar cannot be a chooser. Maybe one day we can have a proper pagan ceremony. For now, we are married, and that is all that matters. The underground bunker is quite a sight to see. Something so thoroughly self-sustaining is a marvel that I had never seen before. I am grateful to have lived long enough to see it. I am also grateful that I was not among the scores of people who went through electroshock therapy. I am lucky. I never thought I would say that I'm lucky after being on the run for 2 years and getting caught. I never thought that lucky would be a term I would apply to myself again. However, all things considered, I am lucky. I have my person. We are both safe. Not only that, we have become instant parents. Right before the wedding ceremony was performed, Edwin and Jackson smuggled out Jennifer and Jonathan and brought them to the underground bunker. We found out that they are indeed twins, and they just turned 7 years old a few months ago. These poor children are not even old enough to remember a time before Project 2025. Their parents died in a house fire while the twins were at school. With no living relatives to take them in, they thought that they would be taken to an orphanage. However, as all the orphanages in the area were full, they were taken to the conversion asylum instead. We will make a life together, even if it's not what either of us thought life would be like before Project 2025 took root. I certainly never thought that I would marry a man I met only weeks before, or that I would be the adoptive mother of 7-year-old twins. Still, here we are. Life moves forward. Thanks to Richard and his group, so do I. Jade. January 25th, 2024. Dear Diary, this morning I woke up from the most horrible nightmare that I've ever experienced. I don't want to write it down because I'm terrified that writing it down would bring it into existence. It is sufficient to say that it had something to do with something called a conversion asylum. The details are thankfully getting fuzzy. However, I do assume that this conversion asylum has something to do with conversion therapy, which isn't even a real therapy. No real therapist would ever use conversion therapy on a person in their care. It's an evangelical Christian concept that tries to pray, discipline, and avert something that can't be changed about a person. I don't know if I can find a way to stop my nightmare from happening. I'm fearful that my dream was some kind of premonition. I wish I knew what I could do to make things better. I wish I knew how to stop this nightmare from coming true. I wish I knew what the other solution was. I'm only a writer. I'm only one person in a sea of billions. I am one voice among the crowd. I don't know what I could possibly do to make the change necessary for this nightmare not to happen. What I do know is what my Nona always taught me. Everything happens for a reason. Maybe this nightmare is a warning. Maybe it's a call for me to be more grateful for what I have. Maybe it is my time to find a way to rise up and find a solution. I don't know why this nightmare had to invade my head. I have to hold on to the belief that everything happens for a reason. Jade.
Hi there, my name is Candace Clarendon. I go by I Love Filmora on social media, and I am the author of the story that you just listened to. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, I hope you'll check out the links in my link tree down below. You'll be able to find a copy of the story that you just listened to for purchase. You'll also be able to find many other ways to support me. Big shout out and thank you to my reader who has helped my sanity more than they will ever know. Thank you. I really hope you enjoyed.
For more content from Candace Clorinda, grab a copy of Secrets of Timber Estate, the Diary of Eleanor Berger. The only thing that could have made it better was to not have a Christian presiding over the ceremony, as well as not having to stay for the sermony. However, and now I have to burp. Oh, excuse me. Life move forward. Blah, 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 blah.